Good evening. I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening, both in the audience and on our TV audience, to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the 32nd State Senate District. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We are political in the sense that we study issues, and when we have come to a position on issues such as statewide policy for education or how to deal with the water crisis or another type of issue such as guaranteeing everyone the right to vote who is a citizen, then we can act on ballot measures or act on proposed legislation at the local, state, or federal level. We are a voter service organization trying to promote good government throughout the country, and as our one of our voter service activities, we put on candidate forums like this so that you, the public, who are going to be voting in the election, are able to watch the candidates, ask them questions, hear what they have to say, and get a better feeling for who these people are before you choose whom to vote for in the election, whether you vote by mail or whether you vote in person at the polling place. Tonight, we have a rather unusual circumstance in that the 32nd Senate District is currently vacant. The sitting senator who was elected in 2014 resigned in January, and we have two elections going on. You will actually see the 32nd Senate District on your ballot in two places. One place will be to fill out the current term from now, actually it will be from like the 1st of August to, or no, the 15th of August to the middle of December. The other seat, which will appear on your ballot, is a full four-year term that will start in, I think people are usually seated in December, and then the session starts in January. So these people will serve from the beginning of 2019 through for 4 years until the election in 2022. So we have two opportunities to vote for people in this particular jurisdiction. And it is your responsibility to figure out what you would like to do to complete the term and then to fill the full four-year term. There are actually 12 people running total. Two are running only for the fill-in term. One is running only for the four-year term. And the remainder are running for both terms. So we'll kind of get into that as we introduce ourselves, okay? We invited all the people who are running using hard copy mail through the U.S. mail, using email and phoning to invite them to come to this event and to participate and to post information about themselves on the League's voting website, which is called votersedge.org. That is a place where you may find more information about some of the candidates right now, and we hope all of the candidates before the election actually occurs. The people who committed to coming this evening, you see in front of you. I did something which I don't always do, but since this is such a complicated election and many of you do not have your sample ballots yet, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. I put the names of the remaining people. Oh, there's one missing, unfortunately. Mr. Taj from Artesia. So there are 5 people who didn't show up, and there are six people who did show up. Okay. We will be hearing from the candidates. They have been asked to follow a set of rules, and I'd like to reiterate those rules for those of you in the audience so that you recognize what the rules are also. They were asked to agree to follow the rules and to ask their supporters to follow the rules in addition. First, presentations by candidates and questions from the audience must be confined to matters involving state government and government policy, not personalities. And we will not be allowing personal attacks during this forum. Questions from the audience must be written and turned in. Our ushers, if you hold your card up, the ushers will come by and pick up the cards and bring them to our question sorters. We sort questions for civility, for clarity, for a variety of issues, and for, to try and cover as many things as we can, and to try to be polite and also make the question understandable. We have asked that no literature be distributed inside the room, that T-shirts and other buttons and so on supporting a candidate not be worn inside the room. You can do your supporting outdoors. But the candidates were allowed to set out literature outside, and you're welcome to pick it up. We also have voter registration forms there, and after the break, we will have some League of Women Voter membership forms also. They're out there? Okay, there are some membership forms out there. And there will be some bookmarks for Voter's Edge, I think. So I would like to move ahead and get started on the forum. In your bulletin, in your program, I listed the cities and areas that are within the 32nd Senate District. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea of, we're kind of on the north end. Not quite the white piece, we're the blue one near the top, and it goes down through Buena Park and Hawaiian Gardens and Artesia and Lakewood. So it's a pretty big area on both sides of the 605 freeway. The candidates have drawn for order of speaking, and we will hear from the candidates, starting at the left with Ms. Delgado and going to the right to Mr. Dreyer. Each candidate has been given 2 minutes to talk about their vision for California with respect to infrastructure and voting processes to make voting as universal as possible. I will read apologies from candidates who sent me regrets for why they couldn't be here. So we will begin with Ms. Delgado, and she has 2 minutes to speak. After the opening statements, all the other answers to questions and closing statements will be 1 minute. Okay, Ms. Delgado.
Okay. Well, thank you, first off, for inviting me tonight, for the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come here tonight. As you can see by the number of candidates here tonight and the number of people who have come to listen, there's a lot of energy around politics these days. Some of it's driven by things that are going wrong in Sacramento and Washington. Too many elected leaders are more focused on their own needs than those of ours. They're acting as if they're entitled to do what they want and behave any way that they want. And they're promoting hatred and divisiveness to hold on to political power. But some of the energy is also driven by more positive things, like the hopes and dreams of our families and communities. That's why I'm running. For my entire life, I've wanted to be a builder of communities and neighborhoods. But most importantly, I wanted to build economic opportunity and housing for our families. That's what I've done in the private sector as a founding partner of a company that builds retail and affordable spaces, and as a public servant, as the mayor of Montebello and an economic development professional for the cities of Pico Rivera and Downey. I'm the only candidate for state senate with a proven record of creating economic opportunity and affordable housing for middle-class families. I'm proud that in the process, I've helped create 15,000 jobs in construction, retail, and through suppliers, new stores for middle-class neighborhoods, and new opportunities for small businesses. That's what economic opportunity looks like, and that's what I'll continue to work on in the state senate. Our communities deserve leaders who will focus on getting things done, not just surviving the latest scandal. And we need leaders who have a proven record of creating economic development. I look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to read a regret from Ali Taj, because I don't have a name tag for him, and he had intended to be here. Ali Taj is a city councilman in Artesia. I regret to inform you that Ali S. Taj will be unable to attend the League of Women Voters Forum tonight at 6:30. Ali Taj currently sits on the Council of Artesia, and his attendance has been requested at a special council meeting this evening. There was confusion with his scheduling due to the separation of his council calendar and his Senate event calendar. Ali graciously sends his apologies to the League of Women Voters. Thank you. So, Mr. Castellanos has not shown up. The one time I talked to him on the phone, I had the impression he was going to come. He lives in Whittier, and I have gotten no other information from him. Okay, so we will now hear from Vivian Romero.
Good evening, everyone. Is my mic on? There it is. Good evening, everyone.
We're all on.
Well, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to be here today. Many of you I recognize in the audience have served and completed my term as mayor in the city of Montebello. I've also completed my term as president of Independent Cities Association, representing 42 cities in Southern California with their own police and fire departments. I am the first openly gay LGBTQ member of my city council, and I have been so excited to break those barriers and pave the way for change and for opportunity. A lot of the transcendent issues that I've tackled include homelessness, anti-bullying, domestic violence, economic vitalization in my community. I look forward to being an advocate for affordable health care up in Sacramento. Some of the initiatives that I've played a key role in the community have been centered around transportation. Supervisor Hilda Solis has appointed me to a number of her committees involving transportation, and I'm happy to say that after 5 years of my efforts, the Pomona Freeway is going to be rehabilitated completely between the 710 and the 605 freeway. I've also been the person who led the Veterans Memorial renovation in my city. It was a homeless encampment for a number of years. It had been vandalized, and my father was a proud military vet, and I decided I would take the initiative to do that. I come from a background of the music industry and have written music for television, some Golden Globe and award-winning television shows. So I am very happy to be an advocate and a champion of the community I represent.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Vicky Santana.
Good evening, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for bringing us together as candidates so that voters can know the distinctions between the candidates here today. My name is Vicky Santana, and I'm running for state senate because our district deserves a leader who will represent us, the community. I am that leader. There is a lot at stake in this election, and I don't think people fully realize what is at stake. But it is the integrity of the office that's at stake. The advocacy for equitable funding for our community, for public education, for the environment, for healthcare for all. That is what is at stake. And I am the one that will fight for our community to ensure that. I've been receiving calls from members of our community concerned that there are special interests that want to influence the outcome of this election. And upon further review, I've realized that the charter school special interest groups have invested over $500,000 to influence the outcome of this election. $500,000. It is up to you, the voters, to ensure that we have an independent candidate who will represent us in Sacramento, who will fight for us in Sacramento. I am that candidate. I was raised in this community by my immigrant parents who are here today. I went away. I knew that college was the only way for a better opportunity, so I went away to college, came back here to Whittier College to transfer after the birth of my son. And then I went to Harvard and got a master's degree in public policy. I worked for Supervisor Gloria Molina and advocated for public safety in our communities and better access to to early education for our communities. I am currently a trustee at Rio Hondo College, fighting to ensure that our students have access to affordable college. It is not enough to build jobs. We have an obligation to prepare the students, our community, to fill those jobs, because we must ensure that they are doing better than us.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Darren Gendron.
Hi, I'm Darren Gendron. I'm a small business owner, entrepreneur, publisher. Basically, for the past 14 years, I've been making my living by publishing comics on the internet. It's a very odd thing to have as my day job, and it keeps me in tune to certain topics that I don't feel we are talking enough about. My main thing that I'm worried about for the future of California is net neutrality. And it's an issue that's currently being tackled by the federal government at the moment right now. But I am particularly running just in the special election just because of one particular piece of legislation, SB 822. That's going to be voted on in the next couple of months in the state Senate, and we have an empty seat that's not currently voting on that legislation. I'm familiar with that legislation. I know what it does. It's going to help protect at least California from a violation of our net neutrality principles from the FCC. Ideally, it'll work well enough that other states will adapt it and give a ripple effect and help protect the rest of California from overreaches of the federal government. But until then, I think it's our responsibility as Californians to lead this fight and help keep the internet free. Other things that I see that I would like to help enact as to help increase the infrastructure for California, we do need to work on our roads. My dad is a Caltrans employee. He retired recently from that. My mom worked in education. I'm important that we lower the cost of education and help keep it affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Bob Archuleta.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, thank you to the League of Women. Margot, it's been a little while. Thank you for the service you've given our city of Pico Rivera. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bob Archuleta, and I think my little more unique than those that are here and those that are running for the 32nd District. First off, I'm a veteran, the only veteran in the group, and that says a lot because I've given my time, my effort to serve my country, and I've got two sons that are serving, both West Point graduates. They too are serving our country. But the situations here in California, of course, are living wage, affordable housing, health care, families, and quality education. We want our kids and our grandkids. And by the way, talk about grandkids, I've got 5 kids and 7 grandkids. So you grandparents out there, you know what I'm talking about, the future of our kids. And of course, one of the things that is so dear to my heart is public safety because of the fact that I served with Montebello Police Department. So we used to chase the bad guys one way and back the other. So I've been there, done that. So I'm very concerned about our law enforcement individuals and our firefighters, our first responders that we call them. I want to make sure their families are taken care of. But I also want to share just a little bit about myself that is, again, very unique. I've been vetted by the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security, the Justice Department, and the White House. Why? Because I was a presidential appointee to the United States Military Academy at West Point. And I've served with 4 United States senators, 5 United States congressmen, and 5 individuals that the President of the United States chose. And I also served with George W. Bush, handling his Minority Veterans Affairs and the Small Business Administration. So I'm here, I'm prepared to serve and represent the 32nd Senate District because we need quality, we need service, and we need representation. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from John Paul Dreyer.
Good evening. My name is John Paul Dreyer. I want to thank the League for hosting tonight. I want to thank all my fellow candidates who showed up tonight for coming to have a debate and so we can have civic engagement. This is a bigger crowd than we had 4 years ago when my friend Assemblywoman Sally Havas ran for the state Senate. This is the Senate district I was born and raised in. I caught my first fish in Woodeo Narrows Park. And our family owned commercial real estate in this area. And my grandparents are buried here in Whittier. My father's buried here. My step-grandparents are buried in Whittier. And I'm going to be buried in Whittier. So I have strong ties to Whittier. Even though I was born in Bellflower, my father served as the mayor of Bellflower. I was elected to the Cerritos College Board of Trustees in the first election for district elections. I fought for district elections for Downey Unified, working with the Obama administration. And also, I've worked to have the elections changed to even year general elections in November to increase turnout in Downey Unified and also in the city of Bellflower, where I put together the plaintiffs in the successful civil rights lawsuit for freedom of speech to pass out flyers and to change our election. We had a special election in 2016 that we won by over 700 votes to have our elections in the November general elections starting this November, and also to have each neighborhood can be represented. And one of the neighborhoods in Bellflower where my grandparents lived before my grandfather died had nobody living in the area, and the area is the lowest socioeconomic area, and now they're going to have representation, and that's what I'm doing to empower neighborhoods to build the infrastructure and have a voice at the table.
Okay, thank you very much. We are moving now to the section of our forum during which our panel of question sorters will be asking specific questions that the candidates have had the opportunity to see if they have already gone to Voter's Edge. And they will each have 1 minute to answer. And after that point, we will move into the audience questions. So for this, we will begin with Ms. Romero. We'll work our way down to Mr. Dreyer and end with Mr. Delgado for the first question. And Barbara, would you like to present your question? This is Barbara Guile from the AAUW organization in Whittier.
Okay. Thank you. Currently, there isn't enough money in the public retirement system to pay for all the benefits promised to government workers. What would you do as a senator to address the unfunded pension liability?
Well, first of all, pension funding, this question caused me a lot of grief today and yesterday when I was looking at it, because it's become such a hot topic in the wake of the economic crisis. Policymakers are all grappling with that. Our city is grappling with that with our own police and fire departments. And the local pension plans are very constrained in their ability to fairly share the burdens of those reforms. That's one big problem. The burdens are falling more heavily on the workers, on the new workers than on the current workers. And changing the status quo is going to require legislative action as well as legal argument. But some of the painful possibilities or options that were going around in my head were cutting benefits or raising employee contributions for new workers, or cutting benefits or raising employee contributions for new service by existing workers, reducing inflation indexing for existing benefits, raising taxes, increasing contributions for the pension funds. There's no simple, easy solution to any of that. And essentially, it's going to require a division of the pain among employers, retirees, and taxpayers, or a bailout by the federal government, and maybe some favorable financial market conditions.
Thank you. Ms. Santana.
Public employees deserve to have the pension that they were guaranteed when they were first hired. So we must ensure that we always have sufficient funding to meet our obligation to our public employees. It is not fair to hire them and have less wages that are not the same as the private sector, and yet not provide them the same pension that we promised them when we hired. At Rio Hondo, we have had put money aside, millions of dollars for the unfunded liability. The state of California has a reserve now set aside for that purpose. The pension reforms have already been drastic. We're asking peace officers to work to over the age of 60. So we must ensure that we're not asking our public employees to work to the point where they're no longer effective in the jobs that they have. So we need to continue to put the additional funding in the system through these reserves to ensure that we meet our obligations. In addition, if we were to have healthcare for all, so that it's not a burden for employers, public employers in particular, to fund the unfunded liabilities, that the increases in healthcare, then that would save up money so that we can put it into the actual pension plans.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron.
This isn't so much of a problem of keeping promises. We should do that. As a state, we should keep our promises. The real problem is that California needs to re-examine its revenue sources. We just last year opened up a new one by legalizing marijuana, but our dispensaries haven't been meeting that demand, so we're not fully tapping into that revenue stream. As of today exactly, sports betting just got legalized, so suddenly a $500 billion of what is essentially dark money is suddenly getting brought into the light, and the state of California can tax that. But on the other side, we can also do things like develop new utilities and provide services and then charge people for those services. For example, a broadband internet high-speed company as a California company, we could use that as a revenue source while also reducing the cost of living for people that want access to the internet at high speeds.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about benefits that have been earned, benefits that have been deserved by our law enforcement, our firefighters, our paramedics who've worked 20, 30 years to know that they'll be able to handle retirement with their families, and we owe them that obligation. And that means that we owe them people in Sacramento can sit down with both sides of the aisle. Whether they be Republicans or Democrats, independents, it doesn't matter. We've got to sit down and figure out a way to make sure that our children, our teachers, everyone who's worked their life to put a living on the table for their families will find it at the end of that term of 30 years or wherever it might be. But it's a matter of coming together, understanding the budget. The city of Pico Rivera, we've put away $1 million a year for our employees. So our employees are going to be able to retire. The pension is going to be there for them. We're going to carry that on to Sacramento. We're going to protect all our workers and our teachers, and they deserve representation. And I hope that when I do get to Sacramento, we'll get the job done. Thank you.
Mr. Dreyer.
I think I'm the only retired teacher on here. I'm getting part of my retirement through CalSTRS. And so when you look at how much of a raise, a cost of living raise you get each year, it depends on when you retire. There's a different negotiated settlement. And so new employees coming in should maybe get a little bit less if we can't afford more, unfortunately. We also need to have more efficient state government. We have cost overruns on the bullet train that need to be addressed. We have a federal audit. We have so much inefficient government locally and statewide that we could find the money. It's there. We also need to find, taxing the dark money. The taxes actually are too high and you're not making as much with marijuana. If the tax was lower, you could phase out the black market and the crime. And that would also lower spending on public safety. We need to have a government that works more like a business, using technology from Silicon Valley. The experts that are driving our economy need to come in and help us run our government much more efficiently.
Thank you. Next, we have a question that will be posed by... Oh, Ms. Delgado, I'm sorry.
It's okay, not a problem. I'm actually really curious. How many in the audience are actually have a public benefit pension or have a neighbor or family member that currently receives a public pension? So a lot of people in the room. I know I do. So that's what this problem represents to me. It's our neighbors, our family members, the people we care about, and their earned benefit. And so it's a sensitive topic, but in the city of Montebello, we have a $190 million unfunded pension liability. The city of Whittier now has a structural deficit because of unfunded pensions. So we have to do something to fix this problem. We have to find additional revenues to fix this problem. And I understand how that process works based on my experience on the local level. And so although this problem is very personal, sensitive, it's our neighbors, it's who we are, we have to start tackling these tough decisions with additional revenue.
Thank you. Okay, now we have another question from the panel, and Beverly Walker from the League of Women Voters will read that question.
Climate changes, and the shifting between very wet weather and drought worry Californians. What strategies would allow your district to both satisfy its water needs and protect the environment? Please be specific.
And we will begin with Ms. Santana.
I recently took a tour of the Delta, where most of the water for California is captured. It's rainwater that we capture, and we have to we want to reuse it. So the governor is proposing a tunnel to be able to channel that water, capture it, so that we could use it for when there are droughts, because droughts are going to come and go. In the local level, we need to do the same. We need to have mechanisms to capture the rainwater that comes down so that we're able to reuse it. We need to incentivize public entities, private employers to be able to recycle water so that when we have a drought, because we will, that we have the water reserve so that we're able to meet the needs of our state. Water is critical for our state. It's critical for our growers in the middle of the state. It's critical for our businesses that are trying to manufacture things that require water. So it's a critical issue, and we need to make sure that we capture it, reuse it as much as possible for those days that are not rainy.
Okay. Mr. Gendron.
I actually grew up in between Whiskeytown Lake, Keswick Lake, Shasta Lake, basically the watershed that we've got hiding in Shasta County. And the proposal right now, there's one to increase the size of the dams up there to hold more water. That doesn't work. Like when the drought hits, that lake empties out, and it doesn't matter how much we're starting with. It's just going to cause more environmental damage around those lakes. That's not a good plan. We need to definitely work on our conservation. That's how we got through this last drought. But we also need to ask certain elements of agriculture to do a better part of conserving water too. We can't ignore the fact that 10% of this state's water, almost 10% of this state's water, is going to almond farmers alone. Like there's one entire industry that's taking 1/10 of our water, and that is something we need to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta.
Well, water and the environment are key issues to all of us. Everyone in this room, as I talked about grandkids in the future, but we're doing something about it in Pico Rivera. Where we can use recycled water, we're doing it. Where we can go ahead and work with WRD, we've done it. WRD has put together a $40 million plant in our city to capture the water. Why? Because buying imported water, and I say imported from Northern California into Southern California, that's been the problem. That's why WRD has been so active. I've been working with them. That's why that plant's coming into Pico Rivera, so it will service not just Pico Rivera, Downey, Whittier, Montebello, all the surrounding areas in the district, and it's going to open up next year, and that's when we start to begin to save our water so we can make sure that everybody understands we're in the north, there's the south, but we've got to bring that water in so we will have plenty of water, and so we've taken the first step. So I will be fighting up in Sacramento to make sure that Southern California, our district, gets its equal share. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreyer.
At Cerritos College, I showed leadership in co-writing the sustainable, cost-effective goal at the college, which led us to win the Drought-Tolerant Landscaping Award. So we need to encourage everyone to switch their landscaping to reduce our water usage, to have smart water usage, consider desalination plants, more water capture, especially along our rivers. We have several rivers in our district. We need to, I'm for the Delta tunnels to help bring water to our area. We need to look at other communities like that are losing their total water supply, like Cape Town. We don't want to be like Cape Town. So we need to work and look for best practices around the globe to help prepare us so we're not another Cape Town.
Thank you. Ms. Delgado.
So there was a part of this question that dealt with climate change, which I think is critical to also talk about today. And transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our state. I certainly oppose President Trump's efforts to repeal these automobile emission standards. And that's critical to reducing gas and climate change, to battling climate change. So I think that it's important that we stick to the standards that we've tried to achieve in our area and also work to make sure we have other forms of transportation in the region. I, for one, am very supportive of the Gold Line extension to Whittier, and also the second line that extends, that brings the 60 freeway Gold Line. So I think that we should make sure to continue to work on these transportation efforts in our region so that we combat global warming that way.
Thank you. And Ms. Romero?
Thank you. The permanence and the magnitude of climate change is going to require an ongoing aggressive approach and commitment to action by all of us, along with the best available science and respect for every state's communities. We need to continue working across party lines for this, strengthening the state water, the transportation, as was just stated, the energy, the natural infrastructure, continuing to develop cutting-edge scientific understandings of how climate change impacts all of us. And we need to invest in our vulnerable communities. We need to continue funding the expansion of recycled water. I, for one, have also been integral in pulling the water lines to irrigate some of our freeways, increase our drought resilience, adopt regulations to increase the collection of the stormwater runoff, and continue to replace the fossil fuels with renewable energy.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask a question about the Senate District itself. As you saw on the map, there are a number of communities that are represented within the Senate District, all the way from Artesia to Bellflower to Whittier and Hacienda Heights. What do you believe are the three biggest problems within the Senate District that should be addressed through state legislation? What kinds of intervention do you recommend? If there is currently one of your issues being addressed in state legislation, is the proposed bill or solution sufficient to deal with the problem? And we will begin with Mr. Gendron.
I'd say, just off the top of my head, the three biggest problems would be cost of living, overcrowding, and property-based crime. And quite frankly, it's my opinion that property-based crime is not so much of a criminal issue as it is an economic issue, that if you lower the cost of living and make it more affordable to live, which again, a tackle on the affordable housing, that is something that we work on. Scott Wiener from San Francisco currently has a bill up right now that is going to be affecting affordable housing, increasing the amount of high-density housing, like 7-story houses or 7-story apartment buildings. I support that bill because, quite frankly, I'm a renter. I just had to try to find a new place to live a month and a half ago, and in this district, it's a great place to live, but it is incredibly difficult to find a nice place to live.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta.
Well, the state of California needs help in a lot of things, but let's talk, number one, about education. I think if we, across the district there, we make sure that our public schools are well attended and the teachers there are well taken care of and paid and so on. And that's why Tom Torlinson, our number one educator in the state of California, has endorsed me. But infrastructure is another issue in the state of California, on our traffic flows. And it's now the homelessness is now affecting not just this city or the cities around us, but across the region and through the state. So these are issues that are there. And I think working in Sacramento with the rest of the senators that I intend to be working with, the idea of coming together and looking at our budget, which is very, very important, making sure that our kids are well educated and making sure that public safety is priority in every single city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreher.
To me, homelessness, lack of affordable housing is really key. We've been seeing it more so on our local streets. We need to build more affordable housing. The state needs to be a bigger partner in creating this. At Cerritos College, I oversaw and corrected problems in our construction bond program. And so I want to help us to build more housing for families, for veterans, for the elderly, for students. I proposed student housing at Sirius College. Didn't get enough support, but students also need housing. We had students who were homeless, veterans, in fact, and we had to try to help them find housing off campus. I think the first thing to do, because I'm running the special election, that I would do is I would write a law that if you resign from the state senate or the state assembly or any California office, local office, that you can't run in the expensive special election that you resigned from. And that'll save us a lot of money in special election costs.
Thank you.
I have, is my time up? Okay.
Ms. Delgado.
So the three main issues I think affecting our district are housing, economic development, creating jobs, and public safety. You've heard me talk about housing. I am an affordable housing developer. I understand what it takes to create the homeless housing that we need and also the housing for single-family residents, for people like us who need someplace nice to afford. We heard that even from the dais today. Economic development, we need to create quality jobs in our area. That's critical. We need job training for construction jobs, for trades that are available for projects like the Delta construction. And public safety is, I think, very key in our area. I'm the only person running that actually has endorsements from local police associations. I have an endorsement from the Montebello Police Association and the Managers Association. I personally have signed the Keep California Safe initiative because I believe that we need to make sure to have more stringent requirements on early release program. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romero.
Yes, 1 in 5 children live in poverty. So for me, the poverty rate, the homelessness, the health care, and that's astounding. Most of these are people of color, children of color, Latinos, African Americans. California should be the leader in reducing child poverty. We have to make more robust investments in our schools, in our education, in our after-school programs. That's not even enough, but too many families can't even afford to put a roof over their children's heads in our communities because of the skyrocketing housing prices. We need to address all of these things and cut some of the bureaucracies involved with the affordable housing. And then as far as the health coverage, I, for one, support the Affordable Health Care Act and getting uninsured people the health care that they need.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Santana.
The lack of leadership currently is the most critical issue that our Senate district faces. We do not have an advocate in Sacramento, and we're all being impacted. We don't have an advocate who's fighting for public school education and proper funding. Our schools are not properly funded, our K through 12 systems. Our parents are paying up to 30% in childcare just to ensure that their kids are taken care of. So the leadership issue is of critical importance. And our state senator is not even here to explain himself to us as we deserve. We also must ensure that our senior citizens are taken care of, that they have access to the health care that they deserve, that their medication costs don't increase in such a way that they're unable to take care of themselves. My parents worry about the cost of medication. They worry about their health care. And we must make sure that we take care of our senior citizen population because they took care of us.
Thank you. This question asks, what is your plan to work with other senators to bring attention and funding to the 32nd Senate District? And we'll begin with Mr. Archuleta.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've said it once, I'll say it again, to work across the aisle. Independent, Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter to me. Let's find the idea, let's work on it, let's get the solution on the table, and let's bring California together. Our 32nd Senate District, as you heard, has no representation at all. When that resignation hit the table, it was appalling what we heard. So we can't allow that to happen again. That's why integrity, trust is so very important in this election. And this is what I'm talking about. The vetting process, those who have the background to serve and represent the communities, they deserve the best of the best. And honest to God, I think I'm the one to do the job for you. But I need your help, I need your support, need your vote, because we've got to come together to better educate our children, care for our seniors, our veterans, and make sure that everyone can make a decent living here in the state of California and be able to get up in the morning and have that job and ready to go to work that brings dignity to their homes and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dreyer?
I promise you, I will be sober at the Capitol. I will not serve alcohol in my office. I will ask to have the banning of alcohol so we have sober discussions with other senators, the governor, the assembly people. So you're really being represented.
Thank you.
Wow,
Ms.
hard to follow that
Delgado.
one. Yeah. So my priorities are housing, economic development, and public safety. So I'd certainly start with those initiatives. Housing is my priority, and I would start to implement the bond programs to make sure we have housing for veterans, for middle-class families. My ideas around that are technical because that's what I do for work. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about those programs. For economic development strategies, I'm really interested in working with community colleges to do job training around large construction jobs as part of the funding of those big projects like the 2 Delta Tunnel project. And for public safety, I would work to make sure that initiative actually gets on the books, and the initiative I mentioned earlier, and actually have some resources for those that are in the early release program. Right now, they are released with $200 and no support services, no programs whatsoever. So I would work to change that.
Thank you. Ms. Romero?
Yes, thank you. I think the civility is lacking in our government at this point in time, and we do need to make sure that we do reach across the aisle and we work. Doesn't matter about party. We're all human beings, and we need to really keep the civility. That, I think, prevents us from making the progress that all citizens deserve. I agree with the Keeping the California Safe Act. That public safety is one of my big concerns as well. I mean, crime is just skyrocketing through communities. I know Montebello has a tough time with it, and we've got a retention problem with police. So we need to make sure that we're keeping our communities safe. So I think that would be my main concern: is how do we work with our Republicans, our other parties, and making sure that we have common goals, common interests, and ensure that the public is kept safe.
Thank you. Ms. Santana?
For almost 8 years, I worked for Supervisor Gloria Molina, dealing with very complex public safety issues, overcrowding in our jails, our juvenile justice system, the cost of risk in the county. And I had to help her get to her goals and work across the aisle with the other supervisors who were Republican. I have the legislative experience. At Rio Hondo College, I've worked with my colleagues to ensure that we have a vision to make sure that all of our students have access to quality education so that they can attain their educational goals. That's what I bring to Sacramento. That being able to solve problems, to reach across the aisle, to make common sense solutions that don't cost the taxpayer more dollars, but actually create a system where government works for us, where it works for all of our residents, whether they're the most vulnerable, our children, our senior citizens, our veterans who are in need of supportive services. That is what I bring to the table, and I look forward to representing you as your next state senator.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron?
With respect to my fellow candidates, I don't plan on reaching across the aisle. I think it's a terrible idea. I'm running as a Democrat. The Democrats have a supermajority in Sacramento. If they have a good idea coming from the other side of the aisle, I will listen to it. I will always listen to good ideas. But if we need to get things done, let's get things done. Let's actually work with those that have the like-minded ideas to help push California farther into the future.
Thank you. Okay. There are two questions related to housing, and I think we'll entertain both of them. First, the availability of affordable housing within proximity to major job centers has become more and more scarce. What is the role of the legislature in resolving the affordable housing crisis? What legislation or programs do you support? What do you oppose? And we will begin with Mr. Dreyer.
My father started the first redevelopment agency in the city of Bellflower, but the people were misunderstood. They misunderstood what it was about, and our city is behind because they took it away and then they reinstated it 15 years later, and then the state took it away. And part of it is the affordable housing component. I need to look at redevelopment for economic development and for affordable housing to bring it back and make it a better redevelopment that guarantees affordable housing, and the money won't be wasted. That would be very key in my plan in the legislature. We need to work with many different groups, faith-based groups, and with other community groups to create housing, maybe like on campus where people work, like work lofts, but for corporations too.
Thank you. Ms. Delgado.
So I've spent a lot of time thinking about affordable housing. Clearly, it's what I do for business. So I'm very supportive of SB 2 and 3. They are both bond-based programs, not added taxes, to create affordable housing. One is for veterans and one is for the general affordable housing population. But we can't build enough affordable housing to solve the problem. My other concepts are SB 827, but one that actually can get approved. That plan was essentially to allow for density around transit-oriented stations, but it forced cities to do it. I believe in local control. Cities should be able to dictate where they want the density, and I believe they should be able to do that with funding from SB 2. I also believe in inclusionary housing, where developers build density in certain areas, but then must build affordable housing component as part of it, and be able to charge the current rate. So currently, the housing that I'm building in Boyle Heights, it rents for $200 to $600 for two-bedroom units. So we should be doing more of that.
Thank you. Ms. Romero.
Clearly streamlining the housing approval process and cutting the red tape that drags out the building approvals, easing the restrictive zoning laws is important. Strengthening the state's Housing Affordability Act is critical, because that's going to prevent communities from killing the proposed housing projects and the homeless shelters, because everybody's saying we want to help the homeless population. Also, the local governments can designate certain areas for housing developments that are known as the workforce housing opportunity zones nearby the job centers and public transit. Proposals that come forward should have a certain allocation for low income and low income, and not only be building market rate developments. So they should set aside a large portion of the low-income housing.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Santana.
We must take advantage of Measure H, which is going to generate $355 million over 3 years, of which $177 million will be for affordable housing. We must be able to utilize that to create affordable housing and create incentives to do it in the areas where there are jobs. Currently, there's been so much gentrification that families that have lived in these communities for years are no longer able to afford to live in their own communities. So the Measure H is going to do just that, create incentives. So we must be able to support those communities and those families that are struggling to make ends meet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gendron.
I'm also in favor of what Proposition H, Measure H, and Proposition Triple H did to help add money to that. As far as legislation that's currently under look, I do support 827. I think that one, I honestly think it's a good idea to build population centers near mass transit, because we need to build up our mass transit. We need to stop our reliance on cars. It's a weird thing as a Californian to say that. I mean, I got my first car when I was 16. I spent a year of my life building that car so I could drive it around. The other bit of legislation that I would actually like to see passed would be SB 35, which helps streamline the bureaucracy to get some of these housing situations improved, because we're at a crisis level with our housing. If we look at why people are leaving California, their number one reason is because they can't find an affordable place to live. And we would like to keep those people.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes, indeed, we do have a California housing crisis here, and with more than 4 in 10 households, when they spend more than 30% of their income on their housing, it's definitely a crisis. And it's not only a financial crisis, it's a family crisis. And I think what we have to do is sit down with our local city governments, because the restrictions on developers are so tight that the cost goes up. And if we can work with the city governments to open up those requirements to a point where the developer can come in and build more, then the other thing is to make sure there's an incentive for that developer. Tell you what, Mr. Developer, you're going to put 20 units there. Let's make 5 of those for affordable housing. You want to go ahead and do something? Let's go ahead and think about that entry-level home buyer who's trying to buy his first home. So let's do that. And the other thing is to work with the banks, so the banks could work and give these people a decent interest rate so they can qualify for the loans for that first home. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. As a follow-up, this deals with the hills that are in the Whittier and Montebello areas specifically. What would be the social justice benefit of building affordable housing on top of active oil wells or recently closed oil wells? And we'll begin with Mr. Dreyer, and we'll move our way back this direction.
Did I start the last one?
Yeah.
You want me to start again?
Okay. We'll reverse the order. So no, but the same people won't be following.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Okay. I have worked really hard with AQMD because my mother and my aunt both died of cancer. And so I was shocked to know that there was like an oil pipeline in our neighborhood. Like, did it leak? There's a petroleum plant near where we grew up. And I worked with AQMD to site them, and then they converted to something healthier because I got involved. And I feel that we need to know where we're building and what are the environmental impacts that can affect cancer rates, and that we should have total cleanup of such a site before it's used for something else. Because my mother was 57. I was just too young to die of cancer. And she didn't smoke or drink or anything, just living in smoggy LA County.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Archuleta.
Thank you. Are we not talking about money, oil? Are we not talking about hills and versus the environment? Are we not talking about the cost of our lives, our health? We've got to make sure that if there's going to be any kind of construction, the environmental impact reports are solid, neutral, not done by a friend of a friend, anyone in City Hall. We want to make sure. We want to make sure that the investigative reports are scrutinized to make sure if anything's going to be done, let's do it with health in mind. Let's take a look at the environment, and let's look at the community. Let them say what they need. Everything should be community-oriented, and you've got to get involved, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron.
Just to clarify, we're asking about what the social justice value would be to put people on a former oil site, right?
That is what the question was about.
There's no social justice value
Referring to the
on that.
oil fields in
Yeah,
the district.
it's absolute null zero. We are humans first. Like, we need to. It doesn't matter if you're a rich human or a poor human. You don't have to live on some place toxic. the government, we could find something else to do with that. We can clean up that area. We could turn it into a solar-based power plant if we had to. It wouldn't be terribly efficient because of the size, but there are other things that we can do with that land instead of put people on it where it could potentially kill them or make them sick long-term. I get, like, the affordable housing issue, the thing that's slowing up so much of the H and the Triple H stuff right now is that people don't want these buildings in their backyard. They're worried about poor people living too close to them. There are cities that would rather classify senior living centers as low-income housing instead of making it possible for a poor person in their 20s to live 20 feet away from them. And we need to get over that as a society.
Thank you. Ms. Santana.
First of all, we need to ban any oil drilling in an urban environment. There is absolutely no reason why any one of us should live near an oil drill. Absolutely not. The environmental impacts to the groundwater are negative. There's families being impacted now. So absolutely, that's the first step. No drilling in an urban area. And there is no social benefit to building housing on top of toxic land. So we need to be more mindful of that. We need to find other places to build affordable housing or housing in general, but not put these communities who don't even probably know the impact or the environment that they're going to be having their kids, the grass that their kids are going to be playing in, that they're going to be digging the ground with. We need to protect our communities from this type of environmental impact.
Thank you. Ms. Romero.
Well, sorry, I'm going to probably get booed for this answer, but that's okay. I have to say that with all of the population growing, increasing, the land doesn't grow. We talk about building affordable housing. We talk about the fact that we haven't weaned ourselves off of oil dependencies. And you see cities like my city. My city seal has the oil wells on it. If you look at Huntington Beach, it was all oil wells. Beverly Hills, Signal Hill, Inglewood, Montebello is all on oil. And we're living on oil. We're living by freeways. We're in probably the most polluted district. As far as the social justice value, I know that with our Montebello Hills design, they're going to have hiking trails, walking trails, biking trails. It's kind of a thing where it's a double-edged sword because we need the land and we need the tax increment, but we also have to realize that everybody did not take a bike or walk here tonight. You drove a car, and the car and dry cleaners and even your toothpaste has the use of petroleum in it. So that's what I stand on it.
This is one that Councilmember Romero and I actually agree on.
For a change.
Inside joke for City Hall stuff. Yeah. So essentially, I wasn't at City Hall when there's a project in our community where 488 acres have been slated for development. A third of the 488 acres are going to be built with 1,200 homes. So oil wells are being abandoned to make way for this project. It includes hiking trails, a public park. So I believe that we have to find a balance in that. I have worked on oil well projects for shopping centers, and I'm aware of the standards of the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources. It's called DOGGR. So there are ways that we can make sure this is done safely, and I would rather focus on going beyond the rhetoric and trying to find a solution for our communities.
Thank you. Okay, this next question says, charter schools are draining funding from public schools, leading to cuts to core services like counseling, libraries, and special education. What are your thoughts with regard to charter schools? And we'll begin with Mr. Archuleta, we'll move all the way down to Ms. Delgado and end with Mr. Dreher.
Well, I'm an advocate for public education. As I mentioned earlier, that Tom Torlinson, our #1 educator in the state of California, superintendent of public education, he endorsed me, and I endorse what he's all about, and that is public education, our teachers. and they need every resource they can get their hands on to give back to our children. Our teachers need to be well paid, well taken care of. And education is so very, very important. But I heard someone mention 500,000 given to one of the candidates. I haven't heard about that, but obviously I don't have that. But I've got you. That's the difference. I've got you, the voters. And public education is so very vital. And I'm going to do everything I can to work with our legislators. I'm going to work with our local city governments, our school boards, to make sure the kids in California get the best education they can get, and open up programs we can after school, daycare, you name it. We're going to help these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron?
I'm definitely not the one that took the 500,000. Just throw that out there real fast. I was talking to my mom this morning, and my mom used to work in the school district as a special needs assistant. She would work with people that had blindness, that had mental learning disabilities, dyslexia. These are students that if we push harder and harder on charters and harder onto private schools, they're going to get left behind, because they're just not cost-effective products. So if we treat our education like a product, we lose those kids. And there are some truly gifted people that are not fully functioning human beings in a physical or mental way. We only have to look at Stephen Hawking and say that that's somebody that the school system could have overlooked because they didn't want to put in wheelchair ramps. The American Disabilities Act probably would let that happen. But the point being is that we need to protect our public schools. I moved here specifically because of the public school district. I served on the school site council. I've actually got a meeting next week at Elliott Elementary. They're very important to me.
In the Senate district, there are 11 unified school districts, 10 elementary districts, and 4 high school districts. That's hundreds of schools in this Senate district. There's only one charter school. Why? Because this community believes in our public schools. And while charter schools are public schools, they are not providing the services that our students need, because the students just simply aren't going there. We need to invest in our public schools, fully fund our public schools, fully fund special education, so our students are prepared when they go to college. At Rio Hondo College, we're seeing a big difference between the students that are prepared and underprepared. That is huge. Our students that are prepared, we can transfer them in 2 years. The students that are underprepared are taking years to transfer. That means that we're not fully funding education. We're not fully preparing our students in order to meet their educational goals. That's where we need to spend our money, in our public schools, to prepare our students.
Thank you. Ms. Romero?
Thank you. I agree that we need to fully fund the public education system, and the Quality Education Investment Act awarded certain low-performing schools extra funding if they agreed to conform to some of the policy changes and reduce the size of the classrooms and keep their experienced teaching staff. And what I find is that we're attacking teachers. We're not attracting teachers. And California's teacher shortage impacts the school districts that have high concentrations of low-income students and the ones that don't speak English. So we need to make sure that we attract highly qualified candidates into our public schools and the teaching professions, and definitely focus our needs on the most at-risk schools.
Thank you. Ms. Delgado?
Thank you. So as the mother of a 15-year-old daughter, I have thought a lot about the quality of our schools in the district. Certainly have thought a lot about charter schools, as all 3 of the V's, Vicky, Vivian, and I, went forward to try to obtain the charter school endorsement. I feel lucky to have obtained that support. And for me, this issue is about kids. If we can't guarantee that our kids will have a quality education in our districts, then parents should have a choice. And that's as simple as the issue is to me. Every child should have the option to go to an excellent school.
Thank you. Mr. Dreher?
As a retired public school teacher, schools are very, very underfunded. So much had to come out of my pocket for school supplies, for the special projects. Teachers need to be better paid, compensated. We need to feel safer. I've been in lockdown drills that actually turned into real drills. There were gunmen on campus. They would only tell us after the fact. We need to protect our schools, whether they're charter or private or public. I've worked in partnerships with them all. At Cerritos College, we have like a private university on campus that provides a BA degree. These are our kids. These are our students. Whatever school that, there was an initiative to have public choice. And they and their parents decided to go to a certain school. We need to make sure there's security guards, there is random wand metal detectors, there's an iPad for every kid for the whole day, not one they have to share and they get it once or twice a week to prepare for the computerized tests. We're one of the lowest funded per pupil states in education. We're similar to states in the South. It is pathetic. We need a larger percentage of our state budget for education. That is the answer, an initiative or state legislation.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. What are we doing with these? Okay. First, I'm going to ask this question. No doubt there will always be alleged ethics violations in the legislature. What should the legislature institute so that alleged violations can be reported without fear of reprisal and allegations can be promptly investigated and adjudicated? During this investigation, what rules should be in place that uniformly prescribe whether a legislator should be allowed to continue to fully serve, should be suspended, or should be allowed to take a leave of absence during the investigation period? If suspension or leave of absence is imposed, should it be with or without pay? And we will begin with Mr. Gendron, move to Ms. Delgado, go back to Mr. Dreyer and Mr. Archuleta.
I'm sorry, you caught me a little bit flat on my feet there. I was about to look
There's
it up.
a lot of it's a
I
whole,
wanna
the whole
say
scenario
that
of
we just,
ethics.
as a state senate, passed legislation that changed the rules as a result of things that have been happening this year. I think so, but I'm not entirely. I know I've been reading through
discussing it anyway.
Yeah, it's under discussion at the least. I don't remember if there was a vote on it to pass or not. But the idea is that this was obviously a gray area and a disaster in our current state senate rules that obviously need to be fixed. Personally, I think. It's not popular to say, but I do think that you should be paid leave without pay if there's an allegation against you, but it should be immediately investigated. The allegation should be able to be made anonymously, and the proper authorities should be able to quickly deal with it. And if it is found out that somebody has actually, if there's evidence found and the person is actually found guilty of those charges, and then at that point, I would have them pay back the money that they got without pay. That would be a fair thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Santana.
Well, first of all, the state legislature needs to stop exempting themselves from rules that they impose on the rest of us. So as a county employee, I'm held to a standard of ensuring that the policy of equity, which I helped develop when I worked for Supervisor Molina, is being fulfilled. I have to report myself. If my staff indicates that they felt uncomfortable by anything I said, I have an obligation to report myself. Any staff member in the county is safe to report any acts against them, whether they're women, whether they're Muslim, whether they're transgender, for whatever reason, they're protected. But the state legislature needs to stop exempting themselves for the very rules that they impose on us. Anything that they're accused of needs to be investigated. And if it's egregious, no, they should not get paid. They should stay home without pay while the investigation. But yes, we must quickly ensure that the things are investigated so that we as taxpayers, we as voters know what the outcome is so we can make a determination as to whether or not those individuals deserve to continue to represent us. Because right now, our former senator does not.
Thank you. Ms. Romero?
I agree that there should be a zero tolerance. I agree with a leave of absence without pay. I'm not sure I agree too much with anonymously reporting, because I think that you sort of have to make sure that, who's reporting isn't making a story up, and make sure that it's coming from a viable source. I know that there was talk about that with regard to the assembly members, that she was possibly set up or framed. So I think that the investigations take time. You can't rush those kinds of things. We want to make sure that people are protected, that there are no reprisals for the one that is the victim, and certainly once it's identified that this is a credible source, that the allegation is substantiated, then the punishment, and they shouldn't be allowed to rerun for Senate
Thank you.
once they resign.
Ms. Delgado?
So definitely, I think we've all seen that not only in Hollywood, but also in government, there is rampant abuse of the system that we have and power, really. So I do believe in holding our legislators accountable for their behavior. I do think people should be made to go on an unpaid leave if there is a credible allegation. Agree that it should not be anonymous, because this is politics, after all. But I believe that it's important that the state legislator also take this and make sure that everybody has the same protection. So people in power are not the only ones who benefit from having this type of system to keep people accountable, but it translates to all working environments throughout government and in business.
Thank you. Mr. Dreher?
My first teaching credential is in civics. And there's clear violations of the constitutional rights of the legislators and the voters that they were elected by to represent them. And my family member coined this phrase, "Me Too McCarthyism." This could shut down our whole government. I don't have a representative in the assembly, and I'm running in the assembly regular race, and I'm running in this race. I don't have representation in the Senate. This is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. This is a violation of the First Amendment, of the voters who I have been disenfranchised. People should not be taken out of office with this unpaid leave of absence. They are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Take them to court. Do not take away our freedom of speech of the person we voted for in a majority or plurality. Let the voters have their power, their representation, until the person is convicted in a court of law and is put in jail.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta?
Well, I believe it's called honor, duty, service. When elected to the state senate or any body that serves and represents a community or an entire state, it's honor, duty, and service. And the code of conduct, the code of ethics, it's got to be handled by a board, an oversight board, immediately. And if there's issues pertaining how a woman is treated, how anyone is treated, it should go before that oversight board immediately, and that individual should be set aside without pay, and repercussions should be he should never ever be able to run for office again. And certainly in our area, the 32nd Senate District and the 58th Assembly District, that's why it's happening. And I think we owe the community, we owe the voters, we owe the state to get tough on these legislators. And if that means that we've got to be a little tougher than most, that's what we've got to do. No pay, period.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of quick, short questions, and then we will move to closing statements. The first one is, do you favor a repeal of the gasoline tax, yes or no? And we'll begin with Ms. Santana.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Romero?
I don't want to repeal it. I oppose repealing the gas tax.
Thank you. Ms. Delgado?
I oppose it. Our city receives $2 million for streets for that.
Mr. Dreyer?
I signed the petition to repeal it. The voters have the right to decide if they can afford a tax, especially a regressive tax like this. Not everybody can afford it.
Thank you. Mr. Archuleta?
We shouldn't have it at all. It's too high, too expensive. It hurts everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron?
I'm in favor of keeping the tax. I think it encourages us to look at alternate means of transportation, alternate means of fuel.
Okay, thank you. Now, another very quickie. Do you support a change in Proposition 13 that has been on our books for since 1978 that would allow a split roll? And we'll begin with Ms. Romero.
I do not.
Quick.
I do not support it.
I'm willing to consider it for very large commercial landowners only, not for single family.
Mr. Dreyer?
Large corporations, but not family-owned businesses or family homes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Archuleta?
No change. It's the only thing that helps seniors and young home buyers come in and level the playing field. It helps us all. We cannot touch Proposition 13.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron?
I feel it does disproportionately favor those that own homes. It is, as a renter, I find it helps lead to higher housing costs. And this is originally one of the symptoms that threw us into an economic wreck in the 80s. I think it's something that we should look at that could be tinkered with.
Thank you. Ms. Santana?
I think that we need to repeal it to protect large business owners, corporations that have big interest in land and property, because there is a tax base there that we could better utilize, but we need to protect the homeowners and keep it the same.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think we will move to our closing statements, and we will do this in reverse order of the opening statements. So that means we will be beginning with Mr. Dreyer. And could you, as you're giving your closing statement, identify specifically whether you're running for the runoff, the up till December term only, the full term only, or both terms? Okay, so 1 minute.
So it starts with me.
Yes, Mr. Dreyer.
John Paul Dreyer, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you again for hosting and all the fellow candidates for showing up. I enjoyed the debate. This has been a great experience. We all stepped up to the plate in the emergency that has become, the 32nd district. This is where I grew up. This is where I do my business, where I went to college. I feel that we need to connect with the voters. That's why I've been going door to door and going to community events. We need to have a more efficient government to afford the high priorities of California voters for education, to protect our schools, provide a quality education, to have housing that is affordable, and public safety. I and my family have been burglarized twice in the last 5 years. We don't have enough deputy sheriffs. We're short 1,200 deputy sheriffs, and let alone how many individual independent city police officers. We need to protect our city and to make more efficiency in our budget for our high priorities and to reduce smog in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Bob Archuleta.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard from everyone. What makes us different? Let me tell you what makes me different. My service to our country, my service to my cities, serving in the Montebello Police Department, the fact that I've got 5 kids, 2 sons that have graduated from West Point and are serving right now, both combat veterans, as I myself am a combat veteran. The other thing that's important here is I've been a mayor and a councilman of a city for 10 years. And those of you who know the city of Pico Rivera, down the street, we've turned it right side up. No graffiti, crime is down, beautiful parks, a beautiful $16 million library. We have turned the city of Pico Rivera around. We've got $35 million in surplus. That is because leadership, integrity. Think about that. This election is about those qualities, leadership, integrity. And I talked about honor, duty, and service. This is what I've been doing all my life. I'm ready to serve the 32nd District. I'm ready to go to Sacramento and represent you. And I'm running on both sides, general and the special. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Darren Gendron.
Yes, I'm running just in the special election specifically to make sure that certain bills that are currently under review by the state Senate get passed and that others get altered. The main one that I would like to see passed is there are currently two vying different net neutrality bills. One actually returns us to the standard that Obama set in 2016. We need that to protect California. There's another one that's watered down because telecom industries are funding different legislative bills. It doesn't matter what party. They are funding this. They want as much they want to profit off you as much as they can. They're using our government to do that, and we have to stop that. Another thing that I need to see happen is we need to get more affordable housing, and we also need to include net privacy. We cannot let companies sell our information, at least without notifying us. That was one of the first laws that Trump signed in. I don't know if you guys know this. The first thing that he did was that third-party companies could sell our information without even telling us anymore. We need to stop that.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Vicky Santana.
This election is not about one issue. It is about a host of issues that impact every single one of us. And we need representation at the state in the state level. That is why I'm endorsed by Congresswoman Linda Sanchez and Assemblymember Ian Calderon. I help build people, investing in our community, making sure that they're trained for future jobs and future careers. I have extensive experience in public safety and ensuring that our community is safe, that we train our police officers properly like we do at Rio Hondo College. This is about the working people in our communities and having a living wage. That's why I'm endorsed by the UFCW Local 324. It's about environmental issues that impact us every single day. We have clusters of cancer victims that live in our communities because we're not paying attention to environmental issues. And that's why I'm endorsed by the California League of Conservation Voters. We need a leader that represents all of us, our seniors, our veterans, our students, because we are in desperate need of leadership in our community. And so I ask you to vote for me, Vicky Santana.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Vivian Romero.
And yes, I am running in both the special and in the prime, yes, in both. Thank you. I just want to say, for myself, once that seat was vacated, it was important to me to step up and throw my hat in the ring. One of the things that drives me crazy about politicians, especially career politicians, it seems like they're never around except for when they're campaigning. One of the things that I pride myself on in my community and as a former president of representing 42 cities was that I was always available. I was always accessible. People would call me to fix a problem, whether it had to do with the seniors and ADA problems to transportation. That is why Hilda Solis has appointed me to several of her very high-powered transportation boards. Infrastructure and transportation is very important to me. We are all losing hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year driving over the failed pavement along our corridors. Of course, as it was just stated, there's a number of issues here: affordable housing, safer streets, affordable health care, women's rights, gender pay equity, environmental justice. I stood up for the problems with air pollution and having clean trucks and the dirty diesel trucks causing respiratory problems and health problems. A lot of these are going to continue to persist, but I want to say that I will be a tireless advocate on behalf of the constituents of Senate District 32, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Vanessa Delgado.
So yes, I'm running for both the special and the general. And I just wanted to share one final thought. Actually, somebody in the audience, a leader in the audience, told me that public servants need to be role models, that we need to see our elected officials as role models. And I'm running for this office because I want to use my experience in creating jobs and building homes to impact our region. And I have tangible results, measurable ways to get that done as soon as I'm in office. And I hope that I can count on your support to make sure that we create affordable housing, jobs, and increase public safety in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the candidates who came here tonight to face this audience and to answer a variety of difficult questions. We encourage all of you to use the information you have learned to do research at votersedge.org and other ballot research outlets to learn more about your candidates, to talk to them, and learn more about what they think before you cast your vote. The election is on June the 5th, and we hope that in the 32nd District we will have a very large turnout. We will be moving on. We will have a break for a few minutes to switch people out, and we will be starting the forum for the 57th Assembly District. Will give us 15 minutes, so 8:30. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate your attention and your support.
Good luck.